Hello there, my name's Mark. This is the first time I've ever done a video blog or whatever you call them, a YouTube clip. Um, I'll introduce what it's all about, and I'm going to call it Simply Bass. And that is exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be bass stripped down to the bare bones for the very sort of uninitiated, to the people who are about to or have just bought themselves a bass guitar. Fancy having a go at it, especially now that we're in lockdown and things like that. Gives us something to do. Now, a little bit about my background. I'm not a music teacher. I don't even profess to know a great deal about music. I've been playing guitar for some years now, not at any great level, but enough to get me by, to busk and to do things like that, and to play along with other people. Mainly acoustic, chords and that sort of thing. I do, as you can see behind me, I do have an electric guitar, and I have another bass over here, which I'll come to maybe at a later lesson, the McCartney type bass. Not my preference, but it belongs to the wife and she likes it. So there you go. So as I say, I'm not an instructor, I'm not a teacher in any way, and I don't profess to be anything like that. So if you want to be a great guitarist and you want to learn properly, then what you need to do is go away and find somebody who is going to give you proper lessons, one-to-one lessons, or follow those on YouTube that make you pay for it. I don't want any money from anybody. I'm just going to pass on a little bit of information. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Simply bass, and that's what it is. As I say, a simple introduction to the bass guitar. So first of all, then, let's say, what is a bass guitar? Well, that's a bass guitar as we know it now. An electric bass guitar, that is one there. This one is a Dean, I think originally a Dean Playmate. I've messed about with it a little bit, I've adjusted it and that. I bought it for next to nothing. I bought it because it's very light. It really is a lovely piece of kit on your shoulders, and as you notice, mine is actually strong, even though I'm sat down, and I recommend people do that, because once it's in position, if you ever have to stand up, having learned to play sat down, you'll find that it's vastly different. And plus the fact you can always get used to it early on as having the weight on your shoulders, and it stays in the same position when you actually stand up. Good strap is always needed for a bass guitar. Acoustic guitars and that, and the electrics probably not, unless you're buying Epiphones and that, they're not as heavy. What you call it. But these, as I say, especially depending on which one you buy a Fender P-Bass or a Squier copy or any of those sort of things, they're going to weigh some weight, unless you can get hold of one of these, and there's not many of the light guitars kicking around. And this is probably made out of some sort of cheap laminate. They normally have rosewood fretboards and that sort of stuff, but this is not an expensive guitar, 50 quid. You know, forget about these bits here. I mean, they're just ornaments. That was on when I bought it, and this is what something I put on at a later date. And it's very handy for how I play, and that is something, again, that we will talk about later on, is a different sort of playing thing. So just sort of get away from this guitar a little bit. Everything that you're going out there to buy, to look at, is going to be something similar to this, especially if you're going to go for a 4-string bass, and I would suggest everybody look at the 4-string before they do anything else. There are 5 and there are 6 strings, but I find them to be a little bit more specialised and that sort of thing. And these have a specific job in life, and that job is to link. The simplest way of putting it is to link the percussion, i.e. the drums, to the rhythm, so that you end up with a machine that will push a sound through, that will link it through. So if you can imagine the beat 1, 2, 3, and you've got the electric guitar, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. That's the sort of thing you're going to get with the bass guitar. It's that to link that same thing, and it's that continuous rolling sound, that driving sound, that sort of pulls it all along, if you like. In a band, in a big band, you know, that will be played by maybe, it's a different sort of bass instruments, what you call it. in the four-piece, the standard four-piece band that you see nowadays, and that were sort of brought up with the 60s with the Beatles and things like that. You're going to get a bass guitarist, you're going to get a drummer, you're going to get a lead guitarist, and you're going to get a rhythm guitarist. They all work together, and this guy comes in between those. So it came about in the 50s, a man by the name of Leo Fender. If you look to my right shoulder, you will see a copy of a Stratocaster. That one's not a Fender, it's I think that's a cheap Encore that I bought from the car boot. But that is a Stratocaster, and along with the Telecaster, Leo Fender made his name in electric guitars. He realised that the bass was too cumbersome, too much of a nuisance to get in, especially the family car when we had things like Minis and Morris 1100s and stuff like that, if you're old enough to remember that. And trying to get a wardrobe into one of those it didn't work. So he came up with this, which is on its own is nothing, but as soon as you turn up the amp, it is reliant, obviously, on an amplification, but all electric guitars are, so there's nothing sort of different there. So you will eventually, if you're going to play the bass guitar, you will need a bass amp. I suggest you look at a bass amp or a keyboard amp like I use, because they are designed to take that range. You can play one of these through any amplifier, even electric, whatever, but you won't get the good tone that you out of it, because it's not set up for that, it's set up for other things. So try and get a bass amp. They're not expensive, and if you're going to play it, 15 or 20 watt is enough, because if you play it too loud, people are going to tell you to shut up and that sort of thing. Right, so that's the bass guitar. Let's have a look at it. That there, as you can see, forget about that thing at the end, that's a tuner. I recommend that everybody has a tuner for a guitar, because people will say, well, you don't need it, you can tune it by ear. Yes, you can. If you're playing on your own, that's fine, if you don't mind it being out of tune. If you want to stay in tune, I suggest you get an electronic tuner, a chromatic tuner like everybody else has, and then especially if you're in your band or you're playing with other people, then you won't be playing out of tune, and you won't look stupid, or you won't have people telling you that you're out of tune. Headstock. If you look at the headstock, there is 4 brass chrome things. These things here, they're called tuning pegs. They're there for a reason. They're called tuning pegs for a reason. They actually tune the guitar. They lengthen or shorten the string, tighten it or loosen it to the desired note that you require. That part there, that across there, is called the nut, and that is where the string begins. That is where the length of the string begins. Your measurement from a string is always starts at that point. And under this box here, there is the things. When you buy your guitar, you will see them. The strings just link through, and it finishes here as well. And the distance between those two is called your intonation. I wouldn't really worry about intonation at this stage. It won't really affect you as yet, and it never does. It's never affected me. It affects people who have worries about it for themselves and mither about it for whatever reason, or if you really are playing in a top-notch band or something like that, and your intonation of your guitar is really out, then somebody will comment about it. Most guitars, when bought, either second-hand or what you got, the intonation is pretty true in them. From my experience, I've not really come across any that were that bad. The strings are running down the neck. That's the neck. On the neck, the thing where the dots are and the lines are, that is your fretboard. The dots indicate the major notes. If you look, you will see that there is set in sort of thing. They're there for a reason, and on this guitar and on many other guitars, those white dots are here. So it gives you an idea at a glance as to where you want to be. They're the start points, basically, in many of the notes you're going to play. Runs through this body, which I presume is laminated. I don't know what it is, but it's very light, and that's why I bought it, as I've said before, I think. Is the tone affected by this wood? I suspect it is, to a degree, but that's why you have an amplifier to change the sound of it. And not only that, if you're in simply bassist, if you're just picking it up, yeah, you ain't going to worry about whether the tone is right at any one of these stages yet. Socket there, that's an input socket, a jack, and that goes out and it leads to your amplifier, and then you have two knobs here. These are your tone and your volume, and they literally do exactly what they do. One turns the volume up, one changes the tone of the guitar. Again, we will forget about the tone. It's not something that you need to think about at this stage. Right, let's get on to the basics of the guitar, and this is where we're going to sort of finish up, because of the next lesson we're going to go on to how to hold it, positioning of hands and all the rest of it. But everybody needs to know how to tune a guitar. This guitar, the bass guitar, if you have any knowledge of guitars at all, whether the 6 strings, you will know that there is a little mnemonic. Every Alsatian dog has got big ears. So basically that tells you that every Alsatian dog got big ears. They tell you what the notes should be on those strings, what these strings are set to. On a bass guitar, we only have 4 strings, so they've got the big ears that are off it. We don't have big ears on the bass because they're not there. You've only got the lowest of the 4 strings that a normal guitar would have. The beauty of that is if you come from a guitar background, if you know where a G is on a guitar or an A is on a guitar and a standard guitar, then it will make life easier when you come to the bass. But that doesn't mean to say you have to. You can go straight to the bass. You do not have to play any of the other instruments, although it would be nice if you have an understanding of them, because obviously you've got to play along with them. Basses are not solo instruments, although some people do solo on them, and I just don't like to see it myself personally, but there you go. Bass as a job. So it is tuned, and as I say, with a tuner, one of these, you know, and the thickest string, which is your lowest string. So this string, although it's at the top of the guitar, so that's the top, it's actually your bottom note. It's the bottom string, and that is an E. The next string, so that's every. The next string is an A, that's your Alsatian. The next one is a D, which is your dog. And the last one, the highest string on this guitar, is a G. Every Alsatian dog got. Simple as that. Big ears we'll worry about at a later date. So that is the basis of the basics of a bass guitar. It is what it is. It's got a specific job to do, and if you stick to that job, then you'll be fine. The only thing that I will say is, just to elaborate a little bit, I think we spoke to it earlier about 4, 5 and 6 strings. If you sort of get yourself on YouTube and that, if you want to look at some bass players that play the 4 string and they play it very, very well, have a look at John McVie from Fleetwood Mac and Tina Weymouth from Talking Heads or the Tom Tom Club. There's many more out there, but just see how they can simply make this do exactly what it's supposed to do. Steer yourself away from those people who are flying down this end and doing all this wonderful stuff. It's great, it's absolutely marvellous, but to me it has very little relevance to bass guitar. It will confuse you, and what you'll end up doing, you'll forget about this instrument. You'll end up going to a lead guitar or whatever, if that's what you want to do, because that guitar was designed for that job. Thank you very much. I hope that any information I've got has been helpful to you, and very shortly I will be doing the next lesson in my basic series, and that is how to hold the guitar, the positioning of it, your fingers, and we will then go on to basic root notes, and they are the most invaluable thing that you'll ever learn. If you know where the root notes are on a bass guitar, you're nearly on a winner. Thank you very much for your time.